everybody, my name is Mathas and welcome to another Judge Mathas video. You know, a question I get a lot from my patrons over on the Patreon Discord is a question about my collection. Specifically, the question is, what is the rarest thing that I own in my collection, my PC game collection? And that made me think, is there really a thing that I own that is the most rare? And if so, what is that thing? Couldn't find an answer. In fact, I couldn't find one single answer. So I wanted to break that question down, especially with the type of collecting that I do with big box PC games. And since one of the reward tiers over on the Patreon is to be able to do a Q&A and ask me questions, I figure, why not, turn those questions into videos if I feel like the topic is worth it. And that's what this video is all about. So, this being brought to you by my patrons, thank you guys so much for the support over there, and let's just dive into the topic of this video. So, what is the most rare thing in my big box PC collection? Well, the first thing I think I should clarify is that my collection is by no means big. It is small, working its way towards medium, if I had to define it, but I quite like the selection of games that I have here. A lot of stuff that I played when I was growing up, and a lot of stuff that I wish I could have played when I was growing up. But as I began to collect big box PC games, I started to realize that they really don't follow the same rules as something like collecting for the SNES or collecting for the Xbox or any console for that matter, because the library is really infinite. There are so many weird, quirky, and interesting PC games out there, and a lot of them are really hard to find because they were just smaller little projects. Whereas an NES or an SNES collection, you have a list of all the games that came out and you can just grab them, and those that are rare and those that are more expensive are kind of easily known. Where I find big box PC gaming is kind of all over the place when you start collecting. So what I decided to grab is what I deem my most expensive additions to my PC gaming collection, as well as what I deem as my most rare or hard to find. Another thing that I learned really early on when collecting was that rare did not necessarily denote expensive, and expensive did not necessarily denote rare. Sometimes you can get a really rare game super cheap because it just wasn't that popular and it didn't do that well and nobody really cares. Whereas some of the more popular stuff that especially became big franchises as the decades went on end up being way more expensive because there's just a lot of nostalgia and success tied to it. So we're gonna talk, like I said, a little bit about the stuff that I found to be some of the harder things to find, especially when I was doing a video on it and wanted to get the physical copy, and then some of the stuff that I'm just really happy to have because it tends to be very expensive, and just kind of knocking that out of my collection list was a reward in and of itself in a lot of ways. You're probably gonna see some stuff you've seen me mention before in prior collection videos, so don't be surprised there, but I tried to grab some of the weirder stuff as well, and stuff that you expect. So let's start with an example of a game that is expensive but not hard to find. Something that you can find on eBay or Amazon pretty easily, but is always gonna run you a pretty penny. That's gonna be Fallout 2. So I'm missing still Fallout 1, which is also goddamn expensive, and then obviously the more modern Fallouts I have. But luckily a fan who likes the channel and watches, big thanks to you by the way, sent me like 3 boxes filled with all of his big box PC games that he just didn't have room for and wanted to send off to a place that was gonna take care of them. And this was one of those games. And I think you can imagine why Fallout is expensive, and I'm sure if you are even remotely familiar with the pricing of physical games, and especially if you're a game collector, this thing can run you anywhere between $150 to $300 at the moment. That price could go up, could go down for some reason, but that's kind of where it's been for the past couple of years and presumably for quite a long time. I mean, and it makes sense too, right? Fallout was a revolutionary game and still in a lot of ways is a revolutionary game. It was a darker themed game. It wasn't a fantasy RPG. Took place in the post-apocalypse, which was still not really that explored at the time that this game came out. And especially the box nowadays, finding the big box version of this game with all the feelies on the inside, the manual, the survivor's manual, the actual game itself, is really hard to find in good condition. I'm very, very, very lucky that the person who ended up sending me the stuff that he sent had kept all of his games in incredible condition. He still has the plastic wrap on this, though it's not sealed, it is opened at the bottom. And it has everything inside of it, which is fantastic. But again, this is a game that you can get pretty much anytime you want, as long as you're willing to pony up the money for it. I'm just lucky I didn't have to. However, with Fallout 1, I might have to. Now on the flip side of things, a game that I found very hard to find in its complete form. I'm talking big box, manual, game, advertisements, all of that stuff in it. Basically, CIB means complete in box. It took me forever to find a copy, and then when I got it and I kept looking even just a few days later and a week later to see if I got a good deal, I couldn't find one. So this is a game that I kind of deem rare, but wasn't that expensive. It was under $50, which is a pretty good deal. It's a game you've seen me review already once, and it's a game that I think I even talked about this in one of my collection videos, but that's the original Legacy of Kain. This is the OG one. It's really easy to find the PlayStation 1 version because it was more popular and probably sold a lot better. This is at a time where consoles were really starting to take off and their technology was getting better and better, and they were able to rival the PC a lot more. And console gaming was way more affordable than PC gaming at the time. So I'm not surprised that this didn't, sell as well as the PS1 version. I am surprised how hard it was to find this game. And when I eventually did find it, it wasn't even on eBay or Craigslist or any of that. It was on Amazon, of all places. And the person selling it didn't have any photos of it, which was really sketchy. Luckily, I reached out and they were willing to answer a few of my questions, and it came exactly as I was hoping it would. But I still don't know how, this game, maybe I'm wrong, maybe just a stroke of bad luck, but this is a game that I've found incredibly difficult to find, complete in box for the PC with its big box intact, that that didn't end up costing me a lot of money. Kind of like I said, the polar opposite of Fallout 2. As far as the game itself, if you want my full thoughts on it, I did a full review on it, you can go check it out, but overall, holds up pretty well, and did a lot of things that were interesting for its time, if not fully explored, but really, really enjoyed the game. Now this one is a game that is pretty rare, not super rare, not my rarest, we'll save that to the end, but both games in its series, and I kind of use air quotes with that, are hard to find, and or at least hard to find complete in box. And it's another game that I've actually talked about in one of my collection videos in the past, and that is Vampire the Masquerade Redemption. Another game that, in its sister game, Bloodlines, Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines, which I only recently ended up attaining a copy of, and it's not here yet. But this game in particular, finding this in its big box form, this one is sealed surprisingly, and it's sealed like a cereal box, has a tearaway tab, is one of those games that I think is rare because it just didn't do all that well when it came out. Much like its sequel, Bloodlines, it kind of became a cult hit, and even then, Redemption never really hit the status that Masquerade Bloodlines did. This was a pretty good game with some really archaic RPG systems that today don't hold up as well, but the story involved and the twist that it takes are really what keeps this game in positive standing, I think, in a lot of people's minds, because when I went back to play it, and I haven't finished it, unfortunately, just the mechanics of the game are really old school and kind of frustrating to control nowadays, whereas more modern turn-based RPGs kind of adapted with the times. Redemption felt stuck in an era that it had already surpassed. I do want to finish this game and then eventually do a video on it here on the channel, so I'll reserve full judgment until that particular point. But this was another one that I had a hard time finding, but is kind of a cool, a really cool box. It is a gatefold, so your typical open up and you get pretty pictures and information. Just really beautiful overall, in great condition. Wasn't that expensive. Again, I think this ran me around the $50 range at the time I grabbed it, which is a little pricey, but for me, since this is kind of my hobby, I allow myself a couple $100 every couple of months to just go buy some stuff. So this was another one that I think is pretty rare in my collection, and really happy to have it. And once I have Masquerade in my hands, to have both of them to complete the set, there's no better feeling than finishing a collection. All right, now we're gonna start venturing into some things that are a little weird. Definitely not something you would expect to have in anybody's collection. And then we'll get to my top two rarest and pretty expensive games total in my collection. I think there may be games you've seen before, but we'll see. So we'll talk the weirdest one that I have first. and that is Wacky Fun Stairs. So if you don't know what Wacky Fun Stairs is, you can go watch my video on it. I did a video here on the channel, and it's basically just a weird collection of mini games that you play over and over and over again, and it very much comes off as shovelware. And from what I understand of the development of this game, which somehow got a sequel, that's kind of what it was. It was just to make a quick, cheap buck, where it's a parody on some silly things like Rambo, and you know, they make fun of like beach body lifters, all that kind of thing. And it's supposed to be funny, and it's very 90s kind of gross out humor. But what I find interesting is that they actually made a box copy of this and didn't just do like shareware or freeware like a lot of games of this ilk are, and it was sold on store shelves. And this is a sealed version of that. And I think this ran me like $10, might have been 20 at most. And probably because it was sealed, if it was opened, more. But this is the only copy I've ever seen of this sold online. I've never seen it at any of my local thrift stores that I try and visit every few weeks. And even since then, looking it up today at the time of this recording, the only thing I was able to find was like a CD, or rather the floppies of it, but no box, no manual. And honestly, you can play it for free on a vaporware website, because that's what this game is now considered if you wanted to. But I wouldn't recommend it. It's really, 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 really bad. And this is just one of those ones that I was happy to be done playing when I finally had finished the game, and it was just torture all the way through. But a hard find, surprisingly, and one of the rarest things I think I have in my collection in terms of just difficult to find games. Next up on the list is a game I think I've talked about early on in the channel's lifespan, and I had it pretty early on when I started collecting, and it's one that I found luckily at a thrift store, complete in box, for super cheap. And when I've looked for it now, finding it complete in box is super hard, and when you do, it's hundreds of dollars. That is the Zork Trilogy. So this was released in the 80s, and it is Zork 1, 2, and 3 all together on some of them on double-sided 5.5-inch floppy disks. That comes with all kinds of really neat stuff in here. Stuff that is specific to the Zork world. So you have a metallic coin that belongs to the Zork underground world, a pamphlet that talks about all the things you can do and where Zork takes place, a fake sales receipt to show that you bought this game from with fake currency from a fake store. Just really silly, weird stuff that were just put into this collection, this anniversary collection of Zork 1, 2, and 3. And as far as I know, I got this. Just so you know, this was, like I said, like it was like under 20 bucks for me to grab. If you want the whole thing in its box, complete with all the feelies, like I said, like $250, $300 is what this usually goes for on eBay. And when I took a quick look today, just to see, you know, where it was and how hard it was to find on eBay, the only ones being sold that were not complete. They were missing something. Maybe some of them had the coin, maybe some of them were missing the pamphlet, maybe some of them were missing the coin. Finding it finished and complete, it seems like a very difficult task and a very expensive one, and I am so blessed that I was able to find this at a thrift store. That's why you should go check out your thrift stores, man. I found this specifically in the board game section, because a lot of big box PC games look like board games, and sometimes the people who are stacking the shelves don't realize it. When I had this and put it on my shelf with my collection of this felt, it's so boring, but it looks beautiful to me. Like, it's just a gray binder with the name and the company and what system it's for, but for me, it was really, really exciting to have this. So this is the Commodore 64 128 version, and it's just super cool. It's super, super cool to have this. It's dope. All right, my last two games. Definitely one of them you've probably seen on the shelf many, many times, and I'll just talk about why it's considered as rare as it is. So this is one I picked up very early on. Planescape Torment, completely sealed, never opened. A little bit of sun bleach on one side from it sitting on the shelf for so long. And this is rare and expensive. Planescape Torment in general is pretty expensive to pick up. Planescape Torment in its big box, complete in box, is expensive to pick up. This version, the version that I have, one of the first runs, is not only super fucking hard to find and expensive, but finding it sealed is even more so. I got a pretty good deal on this and I just couldn't say no to it. I don't know if I'll ever open it because while I don't mind, or typically don't even go for sealed games, this one I ended up getting sealed just because of the price that I was able to snag it for. I was very, very lucky to grab it for the price that it was. Still pretty fucking expensive though. But the reason this is so rare is because Planescape Torment was re-released 3 separate times with the big box on its first run, then a smaller box on its second run, and then a Game of the Year edition on its third run. And finding an original run copy still sealed before the more successful reprints or re-releases or different iterations of the game is a task. In fact, when they were re-releasing Planescape Torment Remastered, or might not be called remastered, but like the definitive edition that's out you can play now with better graphics and all that kind of thing, the developers were actually giving out a signed copy of this thing, of the first run. They were talking about, you know, how hard it was to find the first run copy, blah, blah, blah. And that signed copy alone would probably be worth like $500 or $600 if that's what you're looking for. But I'm quite happy to have this. This is one of the first big purchases I made for my collection, so it really holds a special place in my heart. And it was one of the last things I needed to hit the major Black Isle Studio games that I wanted to have, like Baldur's Gate 1 and 2, Icewind Dale 1 and 2, and I really, really wanted Planescape Torment because it's considered their best game, that dev company's best game, and is a classic through and through. And it's one I'm excited to play and review here on the channel at some point. But just to have this up on the shelf and say I've got a sealed copy of the first run of Planescape Torment is really, really nice. I cherish this piece of my collection, and I think it's really enjoyable to have, and I love displaying it, and it's a gorgeous box, man. The art on this thing is so pretty. The orange and blues contrast so nicely with each other, obviously. And just generally speaking, the box design is very dreamlike and kind of otherworldly, which is the point. It's fantastic to have it, and definitely one of my favorite pieces of my collection. So the rarest thing and my most prized possession actually got sent to me by a viewer. He was moving out of the country and couldn't take this with him for one reason or another, and he wanted to send it off to me as long as I kept it safe and part of my collection and didn't ruin it, which of course I would never do that. That's just, I cherish. These are like my babies. But that in particular is the id Anthology collection. Now, this is super rare and pretty damn expensive. This in particular is only missing one thing, and it's the t-shirt that came with it. He said he had it and ended up wearing it, and you know, either didn't have it anymore or just took it with him. Doesn't really matter. But I can probably pick up the id Anthology t-shirt somewhere on eBay at some point. But the thing that's special about this and why it's so rare is because only 10,000 of them were made. That was it. Only 10,000. Not millions like every other video game, just a select few, because it was at the end of like, this was, I think, 1999. It was a big celebration of all the things that it had done, you know, with Quake and Doom and Wolfenstein and all that good stuff. It just really made id, the developer, to be rivaled with at the time, and is kind of re-rising again nowadays with the Doom 2016 and Doom Eternal coming out. So having this as part of my collection and the cool shit that comes with it, like the keychain of the demon and the steel book that all the CDs are in, it's just really, really cool. And the fact that it was limited run, that only 10,000 were made, immediately makes it the rarest thing I own. Period. There's just not many of these out there, and finding any of them complete in box has been an expensive venture, to say the very least, if you wanted it. Also, my hair is so long, homie. My hair is so long. The box itself is metal as hell. Just the X-ray vision of the demon's skull. Just everything about this box is freaking badass in metal, which is exactly what it is all about. And the innards and the insides of it and everything that it has in it is such a cool feelies collection, especially for id fans out there. And I played a lot of the Doom and Hexen and all that good stuff growing up, so I'm very, very familiar with their work. And to have this as part of my collection, as my prized piece, almost bar none, is special. Because I know I'm only one of, at max, 10,000. And that's my top 7 rarest or most expensive games, depending on which way you want to look at it. They're all difficult to get for one reason or another, and hopefully I was able to explain why rare and expensive don't necessarily go hand in hand. Again, that's something I ended up learning very, very early on when I started collecting. I started watching a lot of other collectors on YouTube and like what to look for and how to hunt, and learning what the difference between rarity and priciness can be. Sometimes rare doesn't mean expensive and vice versa, like I said, and there are a lot of games that are very, very expensive, but not that hard to find. But I've really, taken to collecting big box PC games. It has been such a fun hobby. It's kind of like my own personal library for people who like to collect books. This is kind of my go-to. I've always been a collector since I was a kid, from Pogs to Pokemon cards to you name it. I really enjoyed collecting, but now that I, have my own disposable income and I'm kind of back into the retro scene, to restart collecting big box PC things, going back in some of my older videos of Judge Mathas, you can see I only have like a couple of games here and there. To go to this is awesome. It's been super fun, and thank you for the questions over at the Patreon Discord and whatnot. If you guys want to get in and ask me anything that you hopefully will see pop up on a video, or maybe I'll just give you a quick answer on the Discord or the Patreon private messages, you can do it that way. Jump on over. There's a ton of cool behind the scenes rewards you guys can get, the scripts, bloopers, that kind of thing. And we've got a couple of new things that are about to be popping up on the Patreon page between me and Dean, in addition to the stuff that's already there. So now is the best time to go above and beyond and support this channel if that's something you've been thinking about doing. If not, I hope you enjoyed this video. It was super fun to make. I can lose myself for hours talking about this kind of thing. It's just a love of mine. So, and my hair is driving me nuts today. Anyway, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you very soon with the next Judge Mathas. Bye-bye.